followed by the summary of findings. Let's now have a brief overview of the subject. There are three variables of interest in our research. They are finance commitments, which we'll refer to as FC from this point forward, transport commitments, or TC, and gross domestic investment, or GDI. The first two are assigned as the independent variables, with GDI being the dependent variable. We want to examine the relationship of the former with the latter. And here is the definition of the key terms. Commitments are monetary obligations. FC, again, or finance commitments, are debts that the nation incurs to aid economic development, while TC are the finances devoted to specifically developing transportation means such as infrastructure. Note that they are independent of each other, meaning that the amounts in TC are excluded from FC and vice versa. GDI is the total money businesses invest within the Philippines. Next, although the exact criteria or definition for either a developed or developing country are rather broad, it is a matter of comparison between countries in relation to the local advancement of technology, industrial base, HDI, and overall economy, among others. Lastly, economic standing is the rating of a country supported by a set of bases and assumptions derived from factual data. The conceptual process is quite simple. To process and analyze the data from FC, TC, and GDI of the four countries of the Southeast Asian countries, the four statistical tools we'll be using are outlined, which in turn will produce the expected output, the effect of FC and TC on GDI. Next, the problem is whether there is a significant relationship between FC and GDI and between TC and GDI. We aim to identify up to what extent does one affect the other. Let us now proceed to the salient points of the RRL. Here, we can see four of the most relevant points gathered from other literature and studies. In the first local study relating to the transportation sector of the Philippines, it was revealed that the misuse of TC led to daily losses of around 2.1 billion pesos in 2014. This is a notable fact which suggests that the reported amount of TC does not necessarily translate to economic development, as proper utilization is an important factor. Okay. Next, the second study provides the concept of crowding in. When FC are used to aid healthy competition in the private sector, businesses increase production and can lead to overall economic growth. As for the foreign study about transportation and GDP, it indicated that developed countries tend to have a relatively large share of TC in their GDP. And finally, the last study showed that countries, especially unindustrialized ones, commonly tap foreign debt for the accumulation of FC. Okay. We will now be looking at how the data was gathered and analyzed.
For this part, all data from gathered is from the Asian Development Bank website as of December 31, 2018. Note that all amounts are expressed in US dollars and are denominated in millions. Next, for the research design, we have chosen a descriptive inferential research, which aims to describe a phenomenon while also using statistical tools to reach conclusions based on the associations between the variables involved. For, this, for specific statistical tools were used during the analysis, the results of which we will now present in the following order. First, we have descriptive analysis, t-test, correlation, and regression analysis. Here you can see all the data gathered, the finance and transport commitments per country being the independent variables, with the GDI being the dependent variable. The important data we'll discuss are highlighted in blue. Individually, you can make inferences. For example, Indonesia is the most dependent on aid in the finance sector, despite having the largest GDI. As for the transportation sector, Vietnam is the highest. The lowest FC and TC belong to Brunei Darussalam, and the lowest GDI belongs to Lao People's Democratic Republic. Next up, using the t-test, both the pairs of FC and GDI and TC and GDI show the significant difference. They have the same critical value indicating the rejection region, and both have absolute t-stat values greater than such. This means that both the hypothesis regarding there being no significant difference between FC and GDI and between TC and GDI should be rejected. The highlighted values in the test of differences of data in the previous slide are derived from the following t-tests. Here, you can see for the test of difference for FC and GDI, while this one is for TC and GDI. We will now proceed to the correlation analysis. For this part, it shows that for FC and GDI, the amount is 0.6731, which is interpreted as being relatively strong. However, for TC and GDI, it shows the amount of 0.2885, indicating a possible yet relatively weak relationship. Moving on to the regression analysis, we have first the FC and GDI, where the multiple R shows the same value as the correlation and hence the same interpretation. R square indicates that 45.3% of the variations in GDI are influenced by FC, with the adjusted R square holding a value of 38.47%. A significance factor of 0.0329 demonstrates that there is a significant difference. The prediction equation is shown below, and its coefficients are derived from the intercept and variable x sub 1 in the last two rows. As for TC and GDI, we have a multiple R same as the correlation, an R square of 0.0832, an adjusted R square of negative 0.0314, and a significance factor of 0.4188, which is interpreted as an existing significant variation between the two. The prediction equation is also provided below. The last is between FC, TC, and GDI, where the multiple R is 0.6898, signifying a strong correlation. An R square of 0.4758 is the extent by which FC and TC both affect GDI, along with an adjusted R square of 0.3261. The significance factor of 0.1043 suggests a significant variation between the three. Additionally, the derived prediction equation is given below.
Finally, we proceed to the summary of findings and our recommendation. The strength of correlation indicates that there is a relatively strong relationship between FC and GDI, but a relatively weak relationship between TC and GDI. So the contrast between the two may be explained by the idea that TC, or transport commitments again, are susceptible to misuse as mentioned in the RRL, meaning that even though TC may be high, GDI could still not improve due to improper use of the budget. However, we should note that further studies about this should be conducted, as the literature about TC being improperly expended was only based on Philippine TC. As for our recommendations, definitive financial policies should be undertaken, especially in respect of FC, to increase productivity and hence GDI. In a similar sense, these policies should pave the way for proper execution and implementation so as not to end up in the same pitfall of not being able to maximize the funds properly. Next, proper utilization calls for improved planning and budgeting, especially for projects related to ease of transportation. The amount of daily losses incurred from misuse of TC are alarming, as mentioned in the RRL, and must be acted upon immediately to mitigate further loss and improve GDI. Finally, it should be noted that further studies on the topic, especially in relation to TC and GDI, should be conducted to confirm the results through more advanced means and provide more specific courses of action. Okay. And that concludes our presentation, but here are our sources, and thank you for listening.